Hello, welcome to the next edition of our Spotlight On series. Today, Brendan and I will be interviewing Damian Riley from Capita, who is their client partner and managing partner and the chair of the Capita Can network. This month, our leadership theme focuses on sharing personal information. So we're really looking forward to hearing more about Damian's own experience as we deep dive into this subject.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Damian, and we're thrilled to have the Capita Ability Network as part of the purpose-based community, and I've had the pleasure of meeting you a couple of times and spending time with the network as well. So yeah, it's early days for the network, but can already see that the intentions and the foundations are there for a really impactful network. So yeah, great to have you on, and thanks for coming on.
Brendan, thank you. It's great to be here. I'm really delighted that we've formed the connection between Capita and Purple Space. As you say, we are relatively early days in terms of establishing the Capita Ability Network, but we're really excited about the potential and really excited about the opportunity we've got for learning together as we grow the network in the coming months and years.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. So to start off with, Damian, could you tell us a bit about yourself and what made you interested in chairing CAN?
Certainly, yeah, Lauren. If I start with a bit of personal background, I live in North London with my wife Eileen and our two children, Julia, who is 14, and Lucas, who is 10. I've always been very active, a sporty type throughout my adult life. So I was a rock climber for many years, and more recently I've been really passionate about competing in triathlon. So in addition to spending time with my family, that's how I enjoy spending my leisure time. From a professional point of view, as you've already mentioned, I'm the client partner and managing director responsible for education services. Within Capita, we work with a huge number of schools, colleges, universities across the country, providing a range of services, software and other support. And we also work with the Department for Education on some of their big national programs. And from a career point of view, I've previously held a couple of quite senior roles within Capita, and prior to that, I was a consulting director at PwC for 14 years. And I've always worked in and around sort of big public sector change areas, and indeed have done some work previously on welfare and on disability. Turning to my interest in the CAN network and my decision to become the chair of the CAN network, I think at this point it's helpful to share my own experience of disability. In June 2019, I was out on my road bike cycling around the streets near where I live on a very bright and sunny Saturday afternoon. Unfortunately, I was involved in a very serious road traffic accident. I was critically injured, and I actually sustained a fracture to my C6 vertebrae, which is at shoulder level, and damage to my spinal cord. That resulted in me being left tetraplegic with impairments to all four limbs, in particular my hands, with mobility challenges and also other challenges as well. Clearly, a life-changing event of which I'm still working through the consequences of that. I spent 5 months in hospital. I received outstanding care from the NHS, for which I'm hugely grateful. I came home in November 2019, and one of the things that was really important to me as I was going through my rehabilitation, and remains important to me, was that I wanted to come back to work as soon as I could. And I think the reason for that is that I was processing the loss of a part of my identity that was very associated with my physical capabilities, the sports that I'd enjoyed, that sort of thing. And my identity as a successful professional in a work context, I think in some ways probably became even more important to me, going through that in terms of reminding myself of all the things I could do and the contribution that I could still make. So I was delighted to come back to work in February last year Capita were hugely supportive, both during my time off and also in my journey back to work. And one of the things that organisationally we were very focused on at that time was building our employee network groups. A lot of work was being done around gender, a lot of work around ethnicity, and in particular working with our Black and minority ethnic community within Capita, and our work with the disabled community within our organisation was less well advanced. I've always been a really passionate advocate for the value of networks within organisations, because fundamentally for me, organisations are systems, and in a sense, the system is only as strong as the networks that underpin it. I've always felt myself to be, an ally and a contributor to those networks, and I felt that as one of the most senior registered disabled people within the organisation, that actually it would be a really strong statement personally, but also organisationally from a leadership standpoint, if I was to take on responsibility for chairing and stewarding the Capita Ability Network for disabled employees. And I have to say that in addition to all of the challenges of my day job, it's been an exceptionally rewarding experience so far, and something that I'm delighted that I've been able to get involved in.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
Wow.
It's really interesting to hear about your journey and your story and what made you want to be involved with the network. And I think it's just great to see someone who's so senior as well chairing a network too.
Yeah. Well, it felt like a very visible statement of not only my commitment to what we're trying to do around the diversity and inclusion agenda, and specifically around disability, but also, from a sort of personal point of view, a really important thing.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks for sharing that story, Damian. You remind us of the disability for so many is a transitional experience, isn't it? I'm kind of apart from that. I have dyslexia, for example, which has always been a part of me, and is a stable part of my identity. But for most of us in our community, it's something that we kind of acquire during our working lives and have to adapt and assimilate. And it's incredible to hear the process that you've been through in actually a really short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, perhaps we'll come on to this, but I think the transitional nature of disability for many people is quite pertinent to the question about information sharing. But I know that was something that we wanted to talk about in detail. Yeah,
well, let's dive into that, because I think our leadership theme for July is all about the role that networks and ERGs can have in terms of supporting people to feel able to share personal information. And I think a lot of that is tied to this question of identity that you touched upon earlier. So I just wanted to, we know that there are challenges in terms of data gathering and people's willingness to share information. I just wondered, from your experiences, what have you learned about the challenges around sharing personal information, either from the kind of business side, the network side, or even from your own transition, as it were?
Sure. So look, Brendan, I think it's a hugely pertinent topic and a hugely pertinent theme. And as you say, this is an area of real challenge. If I perhaps just start with a few numbers, because I think that can help to contextualise the conversation a little bit. I saw some recent research that suggested that completion of disability information amongst employees within the FTSE group sits at around 3.9%. Now, that is an extremely low number, and we know that number is substantially lower than the completion rates for things like gender, ethnicity, and other areas. We are equally challenged within Capita around this. I'm encouraged in Capita that it is an improving picture. So when we started collecting this information in January of last year, I think we were at a 2.4% completion rate. In April of this year, we're at 8.8%. So on one level, a close to a fourfold increase, I think, is something that we should celebrate. But I think, you know, that still represents, I suspect, a substantial, you know, that means we're substantially understating the prevalence of disability within our organisation, and that makes it quite difficult for us to have a more informed view on policy, practice, procedure, where we put the efforts of the network, all of that sort of thing. You know, why is this such a challenging area? I mean, from my perspective, I think there are a number of things at play here. So one is, as we've already alluded to, disability can be a transitional experience for many people. Clearly, in some cases, you know, the condition may be congenital, but for a lot of people, including myself, disability can result and has resulted from an event. And for some people, that change can be permanent, and for others, you know, that change can be temporary. So I think sort of capturing that information and understanding it makes it that much more difficult than some of the other characteristics that we sometimes focus on when we think about diversity and inclusion. I think secondly, you know, completing disability information and declaring and describing disability for some people, you know, that's a real acknowledgement of physical or mental vulnerability. And I think for a lot of people that can be potentially quite exposing, potentially a triggering event. And I think we shouldn't underestimate, therefore, you know, the challenge that some people will have around that. Thirdly, I think, you know, many people, you know, those with visible disabilities and indeed those with hidden disabilities have experienced prejudice in wider society and in the workplace. We know that the situation for many people has improved, but actually as a society we still have a long way to go. So there would be understandable anxiety amongst some employees about revealing that information, particularly those with hidden disabilities, for fear that it may result in different treatment, discrimination, prejudice of some kind. And then I think the final dimension to this, which I'm personally is a topic I'm really interested in, is around intersectionality, and that's about both how organisations perceive individuals and how individuals perceive their own situation, where they may have multiple characteristics that may lead to either discrimination or prejudice. And I reflect on this because I think one of the things that really helped me when I came back to work, and indeed why I was completely confident to declare my own disability status, is candidly that I am a white, middle-aged, professionally successful man who has spent most of his working life largely being confident that if I ask my employer for something, I'm most likely to get it, whether that's a promotion, some training, whatever else it happens to be. I have been hugely fortunate to have not experienced prejudice in the way that other people have. And I think that generates a natural confidence that meant that for me, it was probably easier to declare my information and to be confident doing so than it might be from other people in a different situation. And to be honest, actually, that's at the heart of a lot of why I'm now so active in this agenda, because I think if people like me are not standing up and taking a leadership position around, you know, around being confident to articulate what it means to be disabled in the workplace, I think it's very hard to ask other people who are perhaps in less privileged positions to do the same. So I think, you know, quite a complex set of challenges there around how you get to a place where people are more comfortable.
Yeah, it is a complex range of challenges. So you remind us just how multifaceted this issue is, and I think, you know, one of the positive things, so listening to you explain those challenges, which are universal across our community, but you remind us to not to take those kind of low percentage figures at face value. You know, we do occasionally hear businesses almost use, well, look, we've got the 3%, you know, which you found, you know, earlier in your journey, and then almost that becomes the reason not to invest in this topic because the numbers don't justify the investment of time and energy and resources, but actually what you remind us is actually this is about shifting the dial in terms of the number of people that are already here who feel willing and able to share that information because they're confident that it will be used and and received in the right way. So there's a really important point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think low percentage completion rates of declarations cannot be a reason for organisations not to be willing to commit to making investments in this area, and I feel really passionately that's the case. But clearly, in parallel with that, we need to do what we can to get to a place where employees feel more comfortable to share their disability status, because the better the quality of the information we have, the more informed decisions we can make about what do we need to focus that investment on, and how do we ensure genuinely equal opportunities for people regardless of ability.
Yeah, thank you. I found it really interesting to hear the figures of the FTSE companies. I didn't have any idea that it was so low. So I think that says a lot. And also to hear you talking about the importance of intersectionality as well. I think that's really key. It's one of the things that that's our leadership theme for next month in August. We'll be focusing on intersectionality. Yeah. So yeah, really important as well. Thank you. And as you've highlighted some of the really important reasons as to why people find it hard to share personal information. So with the Ability Network at Capita, are there any particular incentives or activities or programs that you're doing to encourage more people to share, or programs or policies that you've seen that you think are quite good?
Yeah, well, Lauren, thank you for the question. We by no means have all the answers. We're a young network and we're learning, but I mean, there are some things that we are trying, and I think, as you've seen from the statistics I shared, we are starting to see some of the green shoots of effectiveness around that. So the first of those is our Be Counted campaign that we ran last year. Now, that was actually a pan diversity and inclusion initiative. We were focusing also on gender, on ethnicity, on sexual orientation, and on a number of the other protected characteristics, as well as disability. And really what that was about really promoting and explaining to our employees why it is so important that we have this information and that we have good quality information on what our makeup and our employee base looks like, to enable us to make better informed decisions and and create better policy around creating a more inclusive workplace. Secondly, I'm personally a very strong believer in storytelling, and on around helping to build the confidence of a wider group of staff, encouraging people, not just leaders like myself, but people from right across the organisation with different experiences of disability, because it is a very broad church, as we know, covering a whole range of different areas, but encouraging, whether it's videos, blogs, podcasts, but for people to get out there and articulate, what their experience of disability has been, maybe some of the challenges they faced, but also some of what they've learned and some of the opportunities that they found. And the more that you can do that, you start to create an environment where empathy is enhanced and confidence grows, and I think that's really important. Thirdly, for new employees, thinking about how you normalise these sorts of conversations in the context of recruitment and onboarding. So creating an environment where up front people feel confident that this is an organisation where I can bring my whole self to work, and I can fully be myself. And that can be around ethnicity, it can be around gender, but it can also be around differing ability. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment on how do we, help people to feel confident that in joining Capita, they're joining an organisation where they can bring their whole selves to work. And then finally, for our existing employees, maybe people who have not yet declared their information, just making that as easy as possible. So at a very practical level, within a large organisation, how many firewalls do you have to go through? what part of the internet do you have to access, how many screens do you have to click. The easier you make that at a very practical level, with the other interventions that I've described, you're going to, the better is going to be your response rate. So I think there are some sort of practical things about making it as easy as possible, which are also really important. So as I said, absolutely, we haven't got all the answers. We've got a long way to go, but I do think we are starting to see some impact in terms of some of those initiatives that we've pursued over the last 12 months.
Yeah, for sure. You say you don't have all the answers, but you have a lot of really strong answers and policies and things that you're putting in place, which I think is amazing to see, especially considering how new the network is as well. So I think the work that you're doing sounds really, really phenomenal and quite comprehensive as well, which is good. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, you mentioned, Damian, the importance of storytelling, for example, and we have seen that time and time again as one of the main, most impactful instruments for change. And I'm always reminded of one of my favorite quotes by Brene Brown, which is stories are really just data with a soul.
Yeah.
So they really complement an organization's work to improve data. So it's good to hear that is on the agenda as well. So you mentioned some of the things that you can do at an organizational level to improve people's inclination to share with you. And, we also know that individual inner confidence, confidence is a word that you used a few times in your previous answer. We know that at an individual level plays a huge part in determining people's willingness to be open about disability at work. So final question, and thinking back to what you were saying in your introduction about, you have this life-changing experience and part of you thinks, well, that's kind of, the bike and the running and the swimming is kind of off the cards now. So it almost sounds as if like you throw yourself into work and it becomes more important that is, that kind of like the successful part of your life, or where the achievement happens. So I just wondered then, what have you learned about yourself in the last couple of years and the opportunities to use, I guess, your brand as somebody who has experienced disability, and how you can apply that and plow that learning back into your career?
Thanks, Brendan. I mean, great question. And I think I can perhaps best summarise this by reflecting on a conversation that I had with my father recently. So I actually turned 50 in very recent weeks, and we were absolutely delighted as we're coming out of lockdown that we were finally able to have my parents to my house for dinner for the first time in well over a year. And I know that for many of us, this has been a really, really great thing to be able to do over the last few weeks. And my father was sitting and I were reflecting on everything that's happened over the last couple of years, and clearly it's been a hugely eventful year for us as a society, but given everything that's happened to me, it's been an eventful time for me as well. And I guess my reflection was at its heart was, I like to think that, what I've lost in terms of mobility and some of my physical capabilities, actually I have gained enormously in terms of personal wisdom and insight. And I think I'd probably reflect on 2 or 3 things in particular. So the first is that having survived a life-threatening accident and managed to rehabilitate myself beyond the expectations of my surgeons and indeed my physiotherapists and occupational therapists when I was in hospital in intensive rehabilitation, has given me a really, really healthy perspective, first of all, on what's important. And candidly, it just puts the sort of challenges that we face in the workplace day to day, for most of us, into a very high degree of perspective. And actually, I found that actually helps me to perform because I worry less. Because there is a very strong and genuine sense, look, if I've dealt with all of this, surely I can deal with this, and that helps. Secondly, and perhaps inevitably, I should say something about personal resilience. I mean, I think as a country, and as a global community, we have been tested by COVID-19 over the last 12 to 18 months. I have certainly felt like, my own resilience has been massively tested by my experience of injury, recovery, and learning to live with disability. And in fact, I've started to think about how I might apply that to the sorts of situations we find ourselves in organisational life. And I'm building a bit of a story around what I'm calling the 7 habits of highly resilient people, to borrow from Stephen Covey, and that's probably a conversation for another time. And I think the third and final thing I would say is that I've always had a very strong belief that one of the most powerful leadership behaviours that you can exhibit is a willingness to demonstrate vulnerability. And I think the fact that I have re-engaged with the workplace in the way that I have, the fact that I've been that I've been very on the front foot in talking about my experience of injury, hospitalisation, rehabilitation, disability, I think people have really responded to that. And I think, if anything, I am a better leader as a result, because I think, a leader that can ask for help and knows how to ask for help in the right way is a leader who has followers. And without followers, there can be no leaders. And that would probably be my concluding point.
Wow, that's a great way to end it. You make some of those points around perspective. I think it's really powerful. Resilience and vulnerability, because it's really incredible insights that you have gained over, as I said at the start, a short period of time. So look, thank you so much for sharing your story and those insights and the work that you're doing at the Capita Ability Network. We will be not only watching your progress, but working with you. We're here to support you, and it's already clear that through your leadership and the passion that I know you also have on the committee and the group, that the network is going to do great things. I know it will benefit the colleagues. I'm sure we'll start to see it permeate your service delivery as well. Every aspect of the business, I'm sure, will benefit. So thank you, Damian, for joining us.
Thank you,
Brendan, Lauren, it's been a huge pleasure. Very much enjoyed the conversation, and I'm looking forward to developing our relationship and learning together as we take this agenda forward. Thank you for your time.
No worries. And look, it did not escape my notice that we will definitely be coming back to you on the 7 habits of highly effective people. So that might be a part 2.
It would be a pleasure. Thank you both.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.